Tech. Our next session for today discusses AI's influence on SEO and what that means for PR professionals. I'm joined by two amazing executives, Mirza Jermovic, SVP of AI Solutions and Advisory at Edelman, and Whitney Hart, Chief Strategy Officer at Avenue Z. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you so much, Kaylee.
Great to be here.
We're going to, the two of them are going to take us through a bunch of slides, a really informative deck, and then at the end we should have some time for Q&A. So I'll come back on and moderate that for them. But for the time being, you're in good hands. I'll let you kick it off.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. Hi, everybody. My name is Mirza. As Kaylee said, I'm with Edelman. I lead our client advisory business covering AI, and a hot topic of conversation right now in the market is how is AI impacting search and brand and client visibility on AI search platforms. And really, the future of communications and public relations, it sits at how is AI driving this change. And I'm really excited to be with Whitney today to talk about generative engine optimization, GEO, which really is a whole new segment of search that is just now coming to bear as a result of the introduction of AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, Perplexity, etc. And I want to dive into what is causing this crop up of a whole new segment of search and optimization. And the answer is the introduction of large language models, or LLMs, is slowly starting to eat away at Google's lion's share of the market of traditional search. Of course, Google is the predominant player in search. It still takes over 85 to 90% of the search market. But what's important to look at is the trend over the last couple of years as a result of these new large language models being released to the public. And that trend is showing us that Google's predominance over the market is slowly starting to decline, while ChatGPT and Gemini, obviously, which is owned by Google, Copilot and Perplexity, are starting to take more and more of the market. And the reason for that is because of the general public's adoption of LLMs. And over the past couple of years, we've seen that volume rise to about 1.3 billion monthly active users on these AI platforms. And we anticipate that this trend is only going to continue as access to these tools becomes easier for the general public as well as for enterprises. And one thing I want to discuss that highlights a key difference between the traditional search journey and the search journey on AI platforms is looking at user behavior and content retrieval. When you think about traditional search engines, you go to Google or you go to Yahoo or you go to Bing and you type in a few keywords, and what you're given is a list of links and websites from that search engine on a search engine results page that is prioritized by relevance and based on the keywords that you inputted. And sometimes you don't even have to put a full question into the search bar to get what you're looking for. With large language models like ChatGPT and Gemini and Copilot, the behavior is slightly different. Most users go to these platforms and ask questions specifically, and what they get back is an answer from the large language model. But how does that large language model provide that answer? And that lies in what we call a retrieval augmentation framework, which is a very technical, fancy term, but it basically just refers to how do these platforms retrieve information, change it, and then provide it for the user. And what they do is they crawl public websites and blogs. They also crawl paywalled media sources because a lot of these AI platforms like ChatGPT are engaged in licensing agreements with major media publishers like the Financial Times, for example, or Condé Nast. And that allows them to crawl content that's behind a paywall, which traditional search engines typically can't do because they're only crawling summaries or the first few sentences of an article, for example. And when it crawls that content, it then summarizes it and provides an output and response for the user. And that output, instead of being a traditional search engine page, which is a list of links that then takes you to a different website, is a summarized answer to the question that the user provided. And that answer is influenced and impacted by the way that the LLM crawls content, prioritizes it, and how its base model is trained to provide outputs to the user. And something important to note is that unlike traditional search, where you're driving traffic to your website, on LLMs, referral traffic is not the primary KPI because links are deprioritized in a large language model experience. They're present when citing information, but you have to click up to 3 to 4 times to actually be taken to the website that the LLM is referencing. So the primary KPI when you're optimizing against activity or how your brand or client shows up on LLMs is actually visibility. So looking at how often does your client or brand show up, over how many times are questions asked relating to a topic that's important to your client or brand. And then sentiment. What is the output that's coming out of the LLM? And is it positive relating to the brand or the client? And all of that has impact in terms of how your client or brand is perceived, corporate narrative, corporate affairs, etc. And all of this is to say that there is a new type of optimization channel and strategy coming out of all of this, which is called GEO, generative engine optimization. And what is GEO? It may sound very familiar like SEO, and that's intentional because it's sort of like two sides of the same coin. SEO helps you optimize your presence on traditional search engine results pages like Google, whereas GEO helps you optimize your visibility and your sentiment on major large language models like ChatGPT, Copilot, and Gemini. And how do you enact a GEO strategy? It's the process of developing content in a way that LLMs recognize it as relevant and reliable, and that they show a preference in terms of prioritization of that content in the outputs they provide users. And all of this directly impacts brand perception. It impacts what is the story about your brand or your client. There could be content on websites out there that has information about your brand or client that actually is not factual, or maybe is referencing old information, and that's still getting pulled through in the responses that users are receiving in those outputs. And that's something to be mindful of because of the volume of traffic on these platforms every month. Crisis management. This is also something that's critical to think about, and something that's a core specialty here at Edelman, is thinking about if there is old information or misinformation about your brand or your client out there that's getting crawled by LLMs. You want to know about that so that you can then deploy and mitigate through a content strategy that puts the right information out on the websites that we know LLMs will crawl. Discoverability. This is also a key impact of GEO and search on AI platforms. There are instances where we've seen anecdotally and empirically a lot of clients and brands actually get traffic and sales and conversions from outputs on major LLMs. While referral traffic is not the number one KPI for GEO, we have seen instances of traffic being sent to brands and clients' websites that drive conversion, which also drives product purchase intent if the information is crawled appropriately by the LLMs, if it's structured appropriately on the client or brand's website. So there's a lot of elements that come along with GEO, and Whitney's going to dive into what are some of the key differences between GEO strategies and SEO strategies, because there are some core differences and they're not the same thing. And we're excited to keep chatting with you all about how to deploy a brand new channel and content strategy with GEO.
Cool. Thank you so much. That was great. So as Mirza set up, AI search is not the same as SEO. And you can see in the table on the right a variety of factors, how those factors are traditionally thought about when it comes to SEO, and in the right-hand column, how that changes for AI search. And there are 3 key takeaways we can talk about today. The ranking approach is number 1. Traditional SEO is looking at keywords and links. Traditionally, you write a lot of blog content or website content around keywords that have large search volumes, whereas LLMs are looking at semantic understanding, and natural language processing. So they're looking for more naturally written, longer form pieces that integrate all sorts of keywords. And these LLMs can understand, based off of one keyword, all of the different flywheel of other types of content and keywords that should come off of it. So you don't need to write content in the same granular way that you used to do in the past. And this brings us to revisiting our content strategy in general. While we're looking at that keyword density, instead now we can go through and look at the content that's published on a website and reconsider how to create more concise answers, how to integrate content, and from that integration, how new content can be created that, again, is written in more natural language. And finally, on the authority side, traditional SEO has always looked at backlinks, and not all backlinks are created equal. Some have higher value for your site than others. LLMs instead are focused on content quality from trusted source mentions. So here we're looking at how do we get high authority, high trust placements that are speaking really positively about your brand. And, as Mirza was talking about, what is the sentiment behind and the depth of content behind what those third-party authors are writing about your brand? It's no longer enough just to have a link with a one-off line about your brand. Really having that depth and having that quality is really important. But all this to say, we can't ignore those SEO foundations. Ultimately, ChatGPT is using Bing's index to quote unquote read the internet. And this is really important. A lot of SEOs have focused on Google and Google rankings and Google webmaster tools over the last 5 years, given Google's dominance in the search market. ChatGPT is really reckoning with that reality because they have partnered with Microsoft, and as such, they use Bing to understand the content on your site and on the internet. So if for some reason Bing doesn't read part of your website, it's not indexed in Bing's search engine, then your content's not being found. And we are finding that in Search GPT, which is the colloquial term for ChatGPT when it uses live internet search, we're finding Search GPT is serving answers that correlate with organic rankings. And this is a study from February 2025 that shows 87% of rankings or content that's in Search GPT correlates with Bing versus 56% for Google. Other studies over the last 3 months have shown Google slightly ahead of Bing. I would say that there isn't necessarily an industry-wide consensus on this topic. But all in all, you can rest assured that there is correlation between what's showing up in traditional search engines with what's being served in large language models. So here at Avenue Z, what we're focused on, we work with clients on AI optimization, which is what we call GEO, as Mirza called it. We focus on 3 core areas: media placements, technical optimization, and the content and creative that lives on your site. So to dive into the media side more carefully, since that's what we're here to talk about today, news and media sources. ChatGPT is most commonly linking to the 9 media sources linked on the right, and this is according to SimilarWeb from a March 2025 study. So we see that top news and media sites like Reuters, New York Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Forbes are all benefiting from traffic being driven to their sites as a result of their large language model answers that they're delivering to individuals. And as Mirza also alluded to earlier, we are seeing that OpenAI has partnered with all of the different outlets that are listed on the right, everything from the Associated Press back in July of 2023 through the summer of 24 with the FT, the Atlantic, News Corp, Reddit, Time, all the way to February of last month with Guardian Media Group in the UK. So ChatGPT is looking to understand and can peek behind the paywall of all of these different outlets that are listed here. So what does that mean for us? Specifically, when press releases are published about these partnerships, OpenAI stipulates that they receive access to archived and current content, including content behind the paywall. And in exchange, ChatGPT provides answers, including attribution and links to the full articles for transparency. So we are seeing that reputable media placements are driving results, and increasingly those results are from those outlets with which OpenAI has crafted a formal partnership. And on the right here, you can see a query. This is actually a query I've been doing because I'm in the market to buy a digital camera for my summer holiday. And so I'm looking for a really specific digital camera that's going to record 8K video as well as take really high quality photographs. And the first result, the first recommendation here is from Tech Radar, which is owned by Future, which formed their partnership with OpenAI in December of 2024. So we see in action how these types of partnerships are driving the results that I'm receiving, in this case, for my summer shopping plans. So I wanted to leave you all today with 3 actionable takeaways, things that you can do when we leave today that will help you on your path towards those next steps of gaining visibility in large language models. First and foremost, I would recommend to start forging relationships. Invest time in building cross-departmental relationships with your SEO team. That might be an agency, might be a group of people internally, one person who manages an agency, and start talking about how to establish collaborative frameworks so that you have a plan in place to react to large language model evolutions, tools, platforms. Right now we're seeing ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, Copilot leading the way, but you never know when another DeepSeek is going to hop into the headlines, and that's the new thing we need to throw some attention towards. I would also recommend that you go audit the content on your website. A lot of that content on your website has been created around SEO keywords, and it hasn't necessarily been thought through the lens of PR messaging frameworks. So I'd recommend that you take some time, audit your website content, blog content, things like this, and assess where you think edits need to be made and bring that back to the SEO team, to those relationships that you're forging, and see what can be done. And last but not least, audit coverage. Look at the coverage from the last 2 years and assess how strategies potentially need to change for your new audience, the AI bot. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for your time. And Mirza, I don't know if you have any comments or feedback on those recommendations. If you'd have any edits or additions, hop on in.
You hit the nail on the head. I think those are great. I think at the highest level, what drives a successful GEO strategy is strong earned media placements. To your point about media placements, technical structuring of content, and ensuring that content is being placed in the right places for the LLMs to crawl. I love that slide that you had around sort of the top sites that ChatGPT is crawling. At Edelman, we've done a lot of work through our GEO offering with clients of helping them pinpoint specific websites, both earned and at the URL level on their owned properties where LLMs are crawling. And sometimes it can actually be surprising where these LLMs are getting information from, which I sort of, I want to put out there. And it's not always the same as SEO. And I think that's important to remember. So we've seen that kind of play out through a ton of different clients across verticals, and they get surprised that LLMs like ChatGPT and Copilot are pulling information from where they do. I had a client recently where we executed a GEO strategy for them, and they found out that a lot of content that is getting pulled about their brand is actually coming from Reddit, which was fascinating. And they had to deploy a Reddit content strategy in order to mitigate some of the information that these LLMs were crawling from Reddit, because it's a highly, I'll say unregulated place. Perhaps that's not the right term, but it's very user centric. So oftentimes the content, is sort of unmoderated, unregulated, and that can leave your brand up to risk. So it's important to do the audit, both of your own content, but also where are these LLMs getting information about your brand? And we do a lot of work with clients around that. So I co-sign all of the recommendations you made. They were great.
Awesome. Yeah, I think also from my perspective, thinking about social media channels. So you're talking about Reddit. Reddit is pulled in through a partnership that OpenAI made with Reddit in late summer of last year. But then also thinking about these new LLMs that are popping up like Grok, which is able to index all of Twitter. And so, or X as it's called now. And so I used to be the chief marketing officer for a blockchain, a layer one blockchain. And now when I go do blockchain or crypto related searches, instead of using ChatGPT, I only go to Grok because it's able to pull in all that content of ChatGPT plus all of crypto Twitter. So when we are working with various clients that are in the blockchain, DeFi, crypto space, for us looking at Twitter and analyzing Twitter content, sentiment, things like this is really important for us. And, Llama with Facebook just announced last week or 2 weeks ago that they've had 1 billion downloads, which is crazy. And so that's pulling in all of the meta content into that LLM as well. So it's really not just limited to what are you publishing on your site, engaging with media, but now also looking over into social platforms, the sentiment on those platforms, what you're publishing, what other people are reviewing about you. It's really far reaching at this point.
I want to get to a couple of questions that people have put in here. One from Abe. A couple of these outlets that were listed by you, Whitney, I'm assuming, host press releases distributed through wire services along with earned media. Does that matter in terms of being read by ChatGPT? Presumably earned is better because it's contextual, correct? Better than the press releases distributed through wire services. Either of you have a thought on that one?
I can go, Whitney, if that's all right.
Sorry, I was trying to pull up the screen share to get the slide that's being referred to. Go ahead, and then I can chime in.
No, yeah. Please feel free to layer on. From my perspective and the experience that I've had with our clients at Edelman, is that having really strong earned media placements in specifically these types of outlets, and more specifically in the outlets that LLMs are actually crawling about your brand, it's important to note they won't necessarily crawl all of these. It may be very specific ones or other ones as well. And an earned media placement establishes authority and thought leadership against a certain topic or category or corporate initiative that your client or brand may care about. And LLMs like authority and thought leadership because that establishes typically answers to questions users will have. And that should bring you back to the user journey difference because a lot of users on LLMs are asking questions. So thought leadership and authority will help you a long way in terms of visibility on these platforms.
I would agree with that. And I'm also going to add in here and take this in a slightly different direction. But one of the things we have noticed is that sites like Vogue that do allow for paid reviews, they're like affiliate reviews, so to speak, all of that content is being pulled in and treated in the same way as an earned article. So while when a human reads it, they can see, oh, clearly Vogue is receiving some sort of financial compensation or attribution for this. If you click a link and purchase the vitamins that they recommend or whatever the case may be, ChatGPT is not picking up on those differences, and they're not treating the content that it serves in the large language model any differently. So this is an important factor to consider in your PR strategies, that at this point in time, and that's not to say that the LLM providers won't get smarter and implement different restrictions or change their algorithm in some way, but at this point in time, taking those paid for or affiliate placements is treated equally to those truly earned placements on really high authority sites like Vogue, and we're seeing it in Condé Nast and Hearst in particular at this point in time.
Following up on that a little bit, can you, we have a question from Trevor. Can you give an example of how you would optimize media coverage for GEO versus SEO, since PR professionals have a little control on how a media article is written? Any kind of optimization, best practices or thoughts on that?
I would say, and this is going to depend on the individual topic areas, initiatives, and products that a client or brand may care about. But if you go back to the idea that LLMs prefer authority and thought leadership and answers to questions, I'll say the old sales trick of having a problem statement and a solution or an answer is going to help you a lot within optimizing GEO content around media places or pitches. So potentially looking at structuring your pitches a little bit differently to these tier 1 or tier 2 media outlets that you're trying to get coverage against, and structuring a new product launch or a new initiative as always helping to address a problem or to make a user's life better in some way or your customer's life better, because those users, whether they're the public, whether it's somebody in an enterprise that's your customer or your partner or your investor, is going to go to these LLMs and ask a question, and the output will be an answer. So your pitch has to be oriented around that content structure to optimize against the GEO visibility and sentiment.
I agree.
Good question. I'll go ahead, Whitney, please.
I was going to say, in the past for SEO, there was such a large focus on making sure that you could get a link from that media outlet and getting that link to go back to your site, because that was how Google understood and conferred authority to your domain and to your page or article in question that the media outlet was linking to. And now there isn't that pressure anymore. Instead, the focus is really around, as Mirza is talking about, what is the sentiment around it? How are you being helpful? How is the LLM understanding the value that you're providing, if you're a product, if you're a service provider, whatever the case may be? And it's making those correlations without needing the technical infrastructure or architecture of linking back and forth. So there's a little bit, in my opinion, less of a focus on like that technical architecture and more of a focus on quality of language and the words themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree. Content is king and or queen again. So it's super important to get that right in terms of pitching content.
I have a question for both of you. Given those media outlet partnerships, like how important are those partnerships? Are you suggesting that PR professionals shape their entire, pitch structure around those particular outlets, or are they, how often are these agreements made? Do you think more outlets are going to become part of this list? Should they be looking at monitoring this list and how it grows? Do you either of you have thoughts on that?
Yeah. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Go ahead, Whitney.
Okay. I think the list is just going to grow over time. I also think it's going to grow internationally. We've already seen that OpenAI has made inroads into France, Spain, the UK, Norway. I think that will continue. I'm surprised they haven't made any agreements with a German press outlet yet. So I'm monitoring for that to come down the line. And I think that at this point in time, it is important to make sure that you can build those relationships with those types of outlets. But again, that's a very specific strategy for ChatGPT. That's not necessarily applicable to other large language models. And we really are in the arms race of large language models at this point. And who will reign supreme in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, really is a large question mark in my mind, particularly as Anthropic's Claude just announced a couple days ago that prior they were only able to use training data. And just as of a few days ago, they now are accessing live internet search. And so I personally believe that Claude is going to see an uptick in use as a result. And they don't have these partnerships in the same way. They're not prioritizing these partnerships and news outlets in the same way. So I do think it's important to consider these partnerships, consider where do you have strong relationships, but Also, keep in mind that OpenAI is one of many options. And while they have the market lead, in my opinion, at this point in time, that doesn't necessarily mean it will always be that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I totally agree with what Whitney is saying. I think it's important to understand and know who the market leaders are, of course. And I also think it's important to look at GEO in the context of your whole content and discoverability strategy in parallel with SEO so that you get the most comprehensive and probably positive result. And I would say looking across platforms is going to be critical. So don't just focus on ChatGPT. Look at Perplexity, look at Copilot, look at Claude. These are all going to have impact on your brand, of course, to varying levels given traffic volume and usage. Overall, we can, of course, provide high-level recommendations on how to deploy a content strategy for GEO, but each one is going to be different for each client and brand. So I hate to break it, but there's no sort of magic pill or solution. You really have to get into the weeds of each brand and understand where are the LLMs crawling content about your brand. It could be some of those, outlets where they have licensing agreements. It more likely than not will be because they're able to crawl more of that content. But there's also going to be non-earned URLs and sites that are being crawled that drive information to users about your brand, like a Reddit, like perhaps that random product or PDP page that your client or brand has that they haven't refreshed in a year and that they need to, these are things that you have to understand first at the client and brand level before you can start to build that content optimization framework, which tells you which topics should you focus publishing content around, and more importantly, where should you publish it to optimize your visibility on the platform. So Whitney and I are here to help you in any way we can.
Thank you both so much.
Great.
We're out of time now, so our next session is going to be at 2:55. We'll allow you give you a short break here, but I really appreciate you both of you talking about this topic. It's